Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. The Four Nations face-off is officially in the rearview mirror, and to nobody's surprise, it is Sidney Crosby who walks away with yet another gold medal. It was a special 10 days for the Pittsburgh Penguins captain, and it started off with that moment with Mario Lemieux in Montreal. And I understand that Sidney Crosby has had copious amounts of moments throughout his illustrious career, but something tells me that that was something special for him. It was him and his mentor in his mentor's hometown, and a town in which Sidney Crosby grew up watching his favorite team. He grew up idolizing the Montreal Canadiens. Every time they go to play at the Bell Center, Sidney Crosby has a special kind of feel around him, and that moment there with the standing ovation for Sid, the standing ovation for Mario, that was just the perfect way to kick off the Four Nations face-off, especially if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, like I'm sure a lot of the listeners here are. So that was a special moment. And then how does he follow it up? Just a 3-assist performance, an absolute clinic against Team Sweden in Canada's opening 4-3 victory in overtime, where Sid assists on the opening goal just about a minute into the game. Insane backhand pass to Nathan MacKinnon, and the Nova Scotia boys kick things off. Then he gets an assist later in the game that is also peak Sidney Crosby, driving to the net, maintaining his balance, and finding the open guy when nobody thought that the open guy was going to be the go-to. And then in overtime, of course, driving towards the zone, knowing it's the end of his shift, and just dumping a pass back 2 lines to Mitch Marner, who's coming in full speed. He goes in and gets the game winner. So Sidney Crosby had a special night to open up this tournament. And then you look at some of the other moments from Crosby. He closes out the game against Finland with an empty net goal. Beautiful play in the middle of the ice where Mikael Granlund is heating up. He has 2 goals in the last minute, and all of a sudden it's a 1-goal game. Jordan Binnington is looking as shaky as he had looked the entire tournament, and Sid does, well, what Sid is expected to do. He steps up for his team. He shuts down the momentum of Finland. He levels Mikael Granlund at center ice, and then he catches the puck, puts it down on the ice, and slams it home from center ice. Huge game, huge moment for Team Canada in that one from Sidney Crosby. And then last night, he didn't have a particularly solid game. He didn't score any points. He didn't make any crazy plays, but he was Sidney Crosby. You could tell that he's a little hampered. He's playing with an injury, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, but he goes out and wins gold. It wasn't his time to be the golden goal guy. It wasn't his time to set his marquee moment. That came back in Montreal. That came back in the opener where he had those 3 assists in that moment with Mario. Last night was Connor McDavid's turn. And at the end of the day, it was a tournament where McDavid, Crosby, and MacKinnon led the way for Team Canada, as we kind of all expected them to. And Crosby walks away with his 6th gold medal with Team Canada. Not only doing it, but doing it with the next generation, which I think is what makes this one stand out a little bit more. Because the last handful, it was, well, Crosby and the guys that he grew up in Team Canada with. It was the guys from 2010. It was a similar roster in 2014. There was still a lot of holdovers in 2016, but shout out to Chris Johnson of The Athletic for this tidbit. The only previous teammates that were on that roster this year at the Four Nations were Drew Doughty, who was probably not supposed to even make the team, but Alex Pietrangelo decided he didn't want to play, which put Drew Doughty into this tournament, and Brad Marchand. Outside of that, they were all new teammates for Sidney Crosby when it comes to playing for Team Canada in best on best. Another just tremendous outing, tremendous event, tremendous opportunity, and tremendous moment for the Pittsburgh Penguins captain. I mentioned it was his 6th gold medal with Team Canada. That's 5 consecutive gold medals for Sidney Crosby in international tournaments. Obviously, he had the long winning streak. He lost against the Team USA last Saturday. That's so far as his only loss as captain of Team Canada. But this was just, once again, an example of him being, and I quote Mike Babcock here, a, quote, serial winner. At the end of the day, he was the one with the gold medal around his neck, and he was the one lifting that pretty cool, I like the design of it, but pretty cool trophy. Passed it off to Brad Marchand. Marchand passed it off to Drew Doughty. It was the old heads. They got the first opportunity to lift that cup. And listen, It's not the end for Sidney Crosby. He has at least one more kick at the can at international hockey, at least one more kick at the can at winning gold with Team Canada, and that's coming in Milano Cortina next February for the 2026 Winter Olympics. There is, of course, the 2028 World Cup of Hockey, but who knows at that point, right? Sid is not even under contract with the Penguins at that point. We'll see if he is, and we'll see if he ends up participating. I would imagine if he's playing, if he's not retired yet, I'd imagine he would still play for Team Canada in that tournament. He might not be the captain. He might not be on the top two lines, but 40-year-old Sidney Crosby, if he's still playing in the NHL, I think Team Canada would still end up putting him on the roster. So we might only get one or two more chances to watch Sidney Crosby represent his country, which is why last night was such a special moment for Team Canada and for Penguins fans who enjoy watching Sidney Crosby. Now, we mentioned that he played through an injury. I think that much was abundantly clear from the get-go in this tournament. Even in that game where he had 3 assists, you could tell that he wasn't really shooting the puck all that much. You could tell that some of his puck possession wasn't as dominant as it had been previous to that injury, to that weird collision that he had against the New Jersey Devils. So yes, Sidney Crosby played through an injury to get to a gold medal. Why wouldn't he? It was his first opportunity to play in international hockey in 10 years. The first opportunity, I should say, to play best on best. He could have played world championships the last couple of years, but it's not best on best. It's not the same. So, of course, he was going to go out there. There were other players and teams that were in the exact same boat. I mean, look at Matthew Tkachuk. He tried to play last night's game. Clearly, he was not healthy. Brady Tkachuk, dealing with an illness. Clearly, not healthy. There were other teams that had players that were doing the exact same thing. So, of course, why wouldn't you expect Sidney Crosby to be on that boat? As far as his timetable and what it looks like now that he's returned to Pittsburgh, now that the Pittsburgh Penguins are returning to play tomorrow against the Washington Capitals, according to Josh Yohe of The Athletic, Mike Sullivan said that Crosby will be considered a game-time decision, which is a great bit of news there if you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, because they got 25 games remaining this season. There's not a whole lot to be excited about with the Pittsburgh Penguins for the remainder of this season. There's the next 2-week stretch leading up to the deadline where all of the excitement is really going to come off of the ice. And then there's Sidney Crosby. So you're hoping that he's healthy. You're hoping that he can go out there and perform. But as of right now, he is considered a game-time decision. I wouldn't be surprised if he missed a few. And honestly, the fact that he played through it and the phrasing from Mike Sullivan was similar to that of, well, he didn't further injure himself, and it seems like he feels pretty good. It makes it seem like this is something that is probably just going to have to get better over time, and he's not at danger of further injuring himself if he plays through it. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does, at the very least, miss Saturday's game. The Penguins, they're not starting slow out of this Olympic break. Sorry, this Four Nations break. They have a back-to-back this weekend, and they have 4 games in 6 days that starts with Washington, New York on Saturday and Sunday, and then a home-and-home with the Philadelphia Flyers in the middle of next week. So if he's going to play, he's going to be testing it out a lot because the Pens have a lot of hockey to play. But we'll just have to keep our eye on Sidney Crosby and keep our eye on whether or not he's still kind of labored when it comes to that upper body injury that he sustained a couple weeks ago and clearly played through at the Four Nations face-off. But a tremendous tournament. I think all in all, the NHL should be extremely happy with how everything played out. I think they owe a massive debt to the players that played in it because I think they're the ones that kind of took this from something that even if they went 75%, would have been really cool. Would have had many, many, many moments, but it wouldn't have made it mainstream as much as it did over this past 10-day stretch. So it was a tremendous event for the NHL. It was a tremendous event for these players, and it was a tremendous event for Sidney Crosby, who has just notched a couple more moments into his thick ledger of crazy moments over his entire NHL and international career. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.